Hey everybody, my name is Dennis. I am here today to add a few words on what I believe is the power of product visuals in your support articles. And just as a side note, I might be slightly biased, but I'll provide certainly some backdrops that I hope will convince you, if you're not already convinced, that this is a good idea. Now, first, perhaps, and there shouldn't be any controversies added to this, we could underline and agree on the importance of your help center and the whole idea of self-service support to begin with. This is not me. I think this is something we've all come to kind of conclude over time, but let's add a few stats to it. And it's not that these two stats are particularly good or the best ones. You can go find your own ones, or even just kind of lean back, look out the window and have some sort of memory of what's going on in your own organization. But in this particular Zendesk benchmark, about 91% of customers said if provided, they would use that knowledge base. And again, I'm not even sure I need a survey to kind of conclude that. Just look within. If I need any issue solved in any piece of software that I've signed up for personally or at the firm, I go hunt for some set of help articles that somehow aligns with, here's my issue, this looks like the answer, let me go have a read. So that near 100% rings true to me. As in, if you build it, they will come. Odd little pun, but I like it. Then there's perhaps not a surprise, but the fact that of all of the options that we provide, whether that be some support article, some live chat on the website itself, some other kind of tactic that we deployed, all of them kind of good and honest. But given that, if we stack rank them, most people would really just rather have that static support article which I can read. I actually don't want to call Citibank with my issue. No, I don't want to email them with some hope of a response time that's within my kind of personal expectation. I would like, say, if I'm not super tech savvy, to read an article about how I set up two-factor authentication, which might just be a little bit kind of complex. So on that note, I think we can conclude there is certainly no escaping the idea of a help center and a very large kind of knowledge base for each one of the features that we have in our product. Now, it is not just that is something that we have to do. I like this kind of interesting kind of insight from Freshdesk, which is that it's not just the fact that we provide service to our constituents on the one hand, who are the customers that we serve, but also that the very agents that we put in place help myself when I do my own tickets, which we should all do at all times, as much as we can, to kind of get this intimate relationship with both product and our users and kind of craft some real empathy. But we actually make agents slightly happier once we kind of put a really robust, proper help center and knowledge base in place. And again, no controversies attached to this. But that is the backdrop of my commentary today. That is the foundation for where this we must have, we need to put in place. Then the next step is, well, for each one of these articles, how much should I invest? That's probably some sort of power law, right? For where I should invest the most in the articles where I get the biggest bang for my buck, right? For where some articles are consumed a ton. Side note, well, if they are, you should take that printout, run to product/engineering right away and have that kind of solved. As in, a power law should forever be us trying to remove those at the kind of one end of that particular power law. But it is certainly kind of a list of that where I now need to go look at the quality of each one of those articles. And when I kind of go advocate for product visuals, I think there's a few things or a few arguments, and I kind of hope you would agree with me here, that we can put forth. One, visual communication in general is both simpler and quicker to consume. Not opinion, plenty of research, you go find your own papers, but there's certainly a set of facts for it. We do know that we can consume more information, as in just higher bandwidth on visuals versus words. Side note, it is not one over the other. The best setting is probably a really solid combo of both, but we increase bandwidth, as in how much I can communicate in a certain amount of time. I also like the fact that there's this ability to simply trigger a different type of emotion or set of emotions with these visuals over me just writing a set of words. And again, it is not one versus the other. It is just that there's some emotions that can be very hard to trigger if I don't have a visual attached to it. And with that emotion, I somehow kind of increase the probability of, me moving the customer just a little bit closer. And really what I want here is surely on one hand to make sure that the very issue that they arrived on I help solve, and I solve it as quickly as possible, and they can be on their way, kind of success on all fronts. But in a best case scenario, I somehow create an emotion for where they arrived in, if we're honest, right, a bit of frustration. And in that frustration, I was able to disarm them just a little bit. And if I'm kind of optimistic, they leave, if not happy, then certainly content with, I am using the right tool. It was somewhat easy to kind of solve. And it's really awesome. They remember it. As in, this is not something where they need to come back in 4 months and solve the same issue again. And not only do they remember it, and I'm perhaps just being silly, but I might be able to turn ordinary users or customers of ours into mini advocates, where they now know and understand something that might have been a little bit kind of complex and are now proud or willing to kind of share that knowledge, perhaps within the organization or even wider in some sort of external universe. So those are all things, again, I believe are attached to the product visual. And I think there's plenty of kind of research to kind of back that up, and not just kind of, that's what Dennis thinks. I think this is something that's certainly worthy of our time to kind of go make sure that if I want to teach somebody something, well, I'm not the first one who tried to do that, and there's really a long history of people trying to make sure that when we do want to teach somebody something, we try to kind of do that in the best possible way. And there's not really many of those papers who suggest that we are allowed to exclude visuals from that. And again, we all remember this, right? From back at college, some textbook without any kind of schematics. I got a computer science degree. That's a little hard. It would be nice if you could help me along here on some subject matter that I'm a bit new to. Now, with that, even if some of you could be skeptical, I don't think you should be, but if you are, it probably comes down to, well, we're all kind of unique with unique products, unique set of constituents that we kind of serve, a unique moment in time, a unique kind of composition of quality of product and what have you. In the end, it comes down to a set of KPIs, if not that, a set of metrics that we are trying to better. And I would probably almost bet you that on each one of those KPIs and or metrics that you care about, stellar product visuals. Side note, when I say product visuals, by the way, it really comes down to product screenshots. Certainly for most of us, for where we support some piece of software, the vast majority, if not almost all of the visuals are product screenshots. Some of them surely kind of schematics or imagery from other kind of platforms and what have you. Now, those particular metrics, and you'll have your own. Let's just pick some silly ones that you might look at but don't really matter much. They're not here as an argument for those are the best ones to kind of go have a look at. They're just examples. So I am sure that the average duration per session is something that you can better. And again, side note to that, there's all sorts of kind of complexities in trying to kind of instrument and track this particular metric, as in there could be some analytics solution that you use for where people arrive from some search on Google, look at the page and leave, meaning you don't have another page to kind of mark the end of that particular session, and that could end up looking like a bounce and not really knowing how much time was spent. But there's certainly plenty of ways to kind of work this metric. And I think there's two things it can do for you. One, I can kill off a lot of the very low duration for where people arrive in some particular article. There's not a set of product screenshots or a set of poor, outdated product screenshots that have them not be comfortable in even being in the right place. They bounce. As in, nah, this is not the right one. We all know exactly how quick we are to kind of determine when we go search or hunt for some piece of information. So that's solving one end. I also think we can drive up a willingness to consume the article in full. If I have a good initial positive experience of knowing I'm certainly in the right place, I can kind of see what I'm looking at in the app itself, what I'm looking at in the support articles is in the same place. I'm now kind of, again, leaning in, trying to invest, go through each of the steps that might be explained here. So I think we can work both ends here. And again, doesn't matter whether this is a metric you care about. It's just an example for where I believe any kind of product visuals, you can kind of tune your kind of primary KPIs and metrics. I also think, if you didn't notice, bounce rate, and again, as a silly, simple metric, is something you can better simply by just knowing they're in the right place. The internet, sadly, has become a place for where I trust very little of what I see, and I'm very quick to judge whether I'm in the right place or not. So it's not about consuming for tens of seconds. It's consuming in the single low digits of seconds to confirm I'm in the right place. And those visuals are doing a very good job of that. We've certainly seen that bounce rate on good matches, as a side note to that, for where plenty of bounces are not negative. You want people to bounce off an article for where that is not the one you should be reading. You should be reading something else. But on good matches, say you do internal search and you track that and you can see this is by design something that should be a good match. You have this problem. You found this in your internal search results page. You clicked it. You should have stayed put. This is exactly what you should be looking at this moment. And then perhaps a little bit out of left field, product visuals and product screenshots are actually just a little good, solid SEO hack. So you run 400 some articles, you run, say, short of 3 kind of product screenshots in each, you have short of 1,000 kind of images. First of all, they should all end up in image search. And not only that, they should have stellar kind of alt text and titles. Side note to that allows you now to include text that you don't want in the article, but actually describe the image so that people can search for things they see, but it's really not part of the problem. As in, you're not describing the QR code, but hey, I'm actually not sure my mom knows what a QR code is if I just said QR. I do think she knows that, hey, that little square with all the dots in it that looks a little odd in that kind of matrix. Yeah, I've seen that many times. So whatever you choose to inject into those alt text, again, it's just an opportunity for you to be found on things you want to be found on, whether for internal or external search. Now, there's a resource that I'll share here, and feel free to kind of ping me if you don't pick up on it. That will have some more robust kind of KPIs. And again, this is a list of kind of 16 kind of more potent KPIs. Usually email me your favorite ones and I'll expand on this kind of external article, or certainly see if we cannot assemble more than this. But there's plenty of good ones. I will still argue that most of them can be bettered by product visuals. Now, there's plenty of product screenshots you can go apply. I want to speak to two types. That is not exhaustive, but I think are kind of two good bookends. There's the full page screenshot that many of us would do, and we do that because we believe it's important that the user ends up with as much context as possible, because the item itself is part of a kind of complex setting. For if you don't see the full setting, it might be even more confusing. Of course, as we do the full page screenshot, we are now making it slightly more difficult for them to know what to focus on, which is always the danger when you include full page screenshots or near full page screenshots. And when that happens, most of us will go apply some form of annotation, a little kind of rectangle, some arrows, some numbers, step 1, 2, 3, plenty of kind of good commentary on that we all kind of dealt with. And we must, it's certainly as a footnote dangerous just to apply willy-nilly full page screenshots without any annotation, because that makes it very hard to suggest or allude to what people should focus on here, and it might actually make it more confusing. And then there's the product element screenshot, for where I do not necessarily need the full context. What I need is just that part of the screen. And when I do the product element screenshot, we all kind of end up writing the articles slightly different, which is that we are now allowed to add more wording before and after the screenshot itself, and we can speak directly to it, and the imagery kind of becomes part of the flow in my text. And when I do that, you rarely need annotation, as in the cropping is the annotation itself, if you will. I'm not sure that's a good way of talking about it, but it's certainly a smaller subset for where you are now allowed to kind of describe in full, like you see in this example here, what happens. Now, you've all somehow, at some point, I'm sure, been exposed to these 12 principles. And you should actually buy the book. The book must be multiple decades old now, and in whatever third edition. Still a worthy read, in my opinion. It's probably going to cost you a pretty penny on Amazon. I think it's out of stock or something like that. But it is a worthy read. There's plenty of kind of summaries around the internet if you haven't read it, and you'll pick up on some good tactics. And again, I'm sure you all kind of been exposed to this. This particular kind of principle that I'm talking about in these two prior examples are what is suggested to be the signaling principle. I like that. And it states that, and again, it's nice when you can apply kind of common sense, right? I just learn best if I'm kind of specifically shown what I should apply attention to. As in, don't beat around the bush. Just tell me exactly what to look at. And it's not just in product visuals. That's true for how you design your products and so on and so forth. But side note, go check out the remainder of these principles. Well worth your time. Now, this is all good and fine, Dennis. You might be half sold, or perhaps you are fully sold. You're sold even before we arrived here. And really, this talk is just a set of high fives, and we go on our way. I do think we should accept, though, that keeping these screenshots, if you will, of our product up to date is hard. It would be great if it was easy. And the funny thing is, with all of the success we've had on the engineering side in the last decade or so, for where things have become very automated. There was a time, I'm sadly old enough to remember, that if I wanted to push new code to production, some new feature, first of all, we didn't do it very often, once a month, once a quarter, a yearly release, the summer release, like it was rare. And it was a production in its own right, for where we would copy things up to the server, massage it into place, and it was just, burdensome on the engineering side. All of that is now pretty much fully automated. Like the most junior engineer on your team today, at some point, 4 o'clock, will push a slight change to a little button on some modal, on some view that you don't even know about. Hey, yes, you did all agree that any kind of updates to the product should go into some sort of Slack channel, so the product marketing manager could write a few extra words, and we could make sure that support was fully in the know. Doesn't happen. Should, but it doesn't happen. So their success, and it's kind of like an odd thing, right? Because most success around the organization tends to be the benefit of everybody. This is one of those where the success of engineering and their increase in velocity turned out to be a penalty for us on the support end, which is that we don't get all the small updates. Shit. We might not even get many of the big updates. Sure, we get all the major ones where there's full marketing support and documents and what have you, and we've got access to staging, but not all the time. So this is hard. These images are very quickly ending up in a setting where they are slightly rotten, to put it bluntly. And we could just then immediately surrender. I just don't think that's the answer. I actually don't think there's really a scenario where you can be allowed to say, well, it is so hard to keep these product screenshots up to date that I've chosen not to include any. I think the penalty for that particular strategy is too high. And I think we got enough evidence and proof and research to confirm we must. The challenge is in to figure out how much do I invest and how much pain am I willing to kind of consume to make this happen. I think there's a few things, or perhaps two particular avenues we can take. One, and we all put this in place, by the way, we should set up some really good processes. We do some sort of audit on most viewed articles. We have a set of inflection points for where if something gets too old, it must be reviewed again. We have checklists for when we create new features and we push that to production. We have a repository of screenshots for where the product marketing manager and product in general kind of help kind of maintain that, and just good processes from good people. Side note, Chelsea from YNAB is giving a talk on this. You should check that out. But we all have our own little list, 20-some checkboxes in some kind of capacity. And we should not surrender on that. That is really what we have today. I do think we are probably on the verge of some form of automation. And there's a few kind of automation hacks which I can introduce here. There's certainly, and hack sounds negative. It's not meant in any kind of negative way. This is kind of a hack for where you might not be aware. So you have a dozen, many dozens of front-end engineers. For them to make sure that anything which they work on doesn't break on every kind of change, they'll run some sort of testing platform. Many of those testing platforms will allow for screenshots to be taken as part of that test, as in it's actually the automated QA methodology in its own right, where they want to make sure I made a change that the visuals didn't change. So they might be able to spit out automatically a whole host of screenshots that you might get access to. I think that's interesting. Certainly worthy a Diet Coke and a walk over to somebody else's desk at some point to see what platform do we have in place for testing. Can it spit out some visuals? If not that, some people are starting to build their own little kind of extract, a build process, if you will, for where, hey, we could actually, as part of our product, build up a set of functions that could spit out visuals so that when you need them, they're always kind of up to date. There's a blog post here on a set of folks who didn't kind of try it out, but actually put it into production. That is kind of interesting. You should check that out. Again, email me if you don't catch it here, and I'll kind of send it over. Now, that's my talk. That's the end. I would be half the entrepreneur if I didn't at least allude to the fact that me and half a dozen other propeller heads have been in the basement for the last 8-9 months trying to build a tool that can automate this process. We're not yet at a version 1, so I'm not selling anything. I don't have anything to sell, but I'm certainly very hungry for feedback and would love to kind of talk to you guys, because we are closer than ever to this kind of first version where you can put in place some automation where at night we can log into your demo account and take that 1,000 screenshots and upload them to the cloud, log into your Zendesk or what have you, check all the articles, see if anything is out of sync, and then update it for you so that it's always up to date. And again, just something which we're working on. Would love some kind of feedback on that. Again, thank you very much for listening. It's been fun. Cheers. Bye there.